It's February 26, 2002, and this is my interview with D. Schwartz.
You want to stop?
Okay. Mrs. Schwartz, when were you born?
February 3rd, 1938,
Where were you born?
in Vienna, Austria.
Okay. What was your mother's name? Where was she born?
Well, do you want her maiden name or? Okay, my mother's name is Ida, and her maiden name was Rubel, R-U-B-E-L, and M-U-S-C-H-E-L was the last name, which was my maiden name. And she was born in Bojan, Romania.
Okay. How do you spell Bojan?
I knew you'd ask that.
Don't worry about it.
B-O-U-J-A-N, and it's Romania. Just the way it sounds.
Okay. What about your father? What was his name and where was he
his
born?
name is Isidore, I-S-I-D-O-R, and M-U-S-C-H-E-L.
Okay.
And I believe he was born in Hungary, but I'm not sure exactly where.
Where did they live when they met each other?
In Austria.
In Austria. What can you tell me about your parents' life before the war? Like, what kind of stories did they tell you about their heritage?
Okay, they had a very good life before the war. My mother came from what we could call in America upper socioeconomic level, very privileged, which in turn actually saved our life. My grandmother's first husband died in World War I, and then she remarried this gentleman, and he was quite comfortable. And my father was a tradesman. He was a little bit of a rebel in his family. His family was basically Orthodox Jewish. I don't know what they did, to be honest, as you think about it, but my father did not really follow that persuasion. I mean, he remained Jewish, of course, but not Orthodox, and he went on to trade school. He became a fur designer and was quite successful in Europe. And they had a very good life. However, they were very aware that things were not good for Jewish people, and they were aware of that most of their young life. But they were really not totally affected until later, when I had an uncle who would not be admitted to law school because he was Jewish, but somehow he did manage to get somewhere because he was a lawyer. And my father's brothers were all in some type of business, but I really can't tell you what it is.
Did your parents ever talk about or recall the first time that they remember Nazi control in their towns? Like the video that was
As soon as Hitler came into power, the day that life was going to be held.
maybe how were you different than other Jewish children or infants?
Okay, well, I was an infant. My mother's quite dark complected, dark features. My father had dark hair. However, the irony is I was not. I was blonde and blue-eyed.
Looks like a German child.
I certainly didn't look like a Jewish child. And it's interesting. And we have our 4 grandchildren, 2 of whom are blonde and blue-eyed, and the others are dark. And 2 of my children are light-colored. My oldest one is darker, and then my middle son started having lighter features, and our youngest daughter was blonde and blue-eyed, and she's still blue-eyed. And so genetically, there was a strange pattern there. There was a time when my mother took me for a walk in the carriage, and one of the Nazis picked me up off the carriage. Well, had I probably not looked like I did, I would have been murdered on the spot, because they certainly didn't want any more Jewish babies around. But he commented that I was cute and put me back in the carriage, and really didn't do much with my mother either, which was a miracle. But we have had so many miracles that, and I think that's the part that makes my story unique. It isn't what we went through, it's what we were spared. And it didn't just happen. I mean, I can't ever believe that, and I never will.
It was very hard for Jews to get away from all of that, and it was very hard to get to America because you had to have a sponsor. What was a miracle that led to your family getting a sponsor?
This is an interesting question. Because my grandmother was very well-to-do, she often, this is so ironic, she paid for educations for people to go to school. I ended up teaching in a private school where this is done a lot. I mean, when I think about it, it just blows my mind. And she paid for a young man who came from the same village that she did years ago. He wanted to become an opera singer, and so she paid for some of his education, and he then was going to come to America to make his way in the world, and he did, and she forgot about it. And he sent her along the way a postcard. And she happened to put the postcard inside a prayer book and stuck it on a shelf. Years passed, and Hitler came, and we knew nobody in America. And we knew that she felt we were all doomed. And one day her maid was cleaning up or whatever, and the postcard fell out of the prayer book. And there was a return address on a postcard. I think of the irony there. So immediately she wrote to him. He immediately, being appreciative of what she had done, made contact with Davidson Brothers. I don't know if you remember Davidson's. They used to have a store at Keystone at the Crossing. They used to have a store at Glendale. They had a major first store years and years and years ago. Downtown, it was a salon, and it was gorgeous. And the Davidson Brothers sponsored us because the only way you could get a sponsor is if they would assure that the person they're sponsoring would not be a burden on the American society. Well, they hired my father. So that was just unbelievable. Plus, this man also did not become an opera singer. He became a cantor in the synagogue here in Indianapolis. So that was the American connection. However, my father had been arrested several times by the Gestapo and let go. And my father's a little short man, and he was mighty. And he was very quiet. He was one of the gentlest people you'd ever care to meet. And he always brought me up with, be careful of what authority you follow. Just because someone wears a uniform doesn't mean, and I kind of, and still in me. Well, the two Gestapos that picked him up and told him to sit there had to go to the bathroom. So they went to the bathroom, and when they went, he got up and left. In other words, he was not intimidated by them at all. And so I thought that was kind of a cute story, because if you'd see it, you would surely not think this was this kind of a person. So he got away. The other story is that in the passport, if you look, there's a picture of my mother. When the SS made out the passport, they were not going to let my mother come across. So my father said, we all go or we all die. He wasn't going to leave her. So then he looked at my mother, and one of the reasons she couldn't come is she was Romanian, and they had a quota system, and she was past the quota system. So he stamped on the passport that, I don't know quite where it is, but that she was my nurse and not my mother. Well, who cared? It was the case. So there's a picture of my mother. Shows you how young she was at the time. And here's a picture of me, blonde and blue-eyed. And he was a rather more human type SS man that led us through. In order to get to the ship to come to America, they had to go through Holland. They went to Holland and missed the train that would take them to the ship. So they thought, well, that's it. Well, there was another train that they took several hours later that would still get them to the ship on time. Had they not missed the train, I would not be sitting here telling you this story, because everyone on that train was stopped and murdered. So I think about that a lot. In order to get to the ship, you had to take a little dinghy, for lack of a better description, from the port to the ship. And the people floated out and went up this ladder to get onto this steamship or whatever, passenger ship. And my father was the last one, because he was holding me to climb this ladder. And when he got up on the ship, the ladder fell down into the ocean. So there's almost, and things like that have happened over and over again. So that's part of that miracle. This is the passenger itinerary. It was not the normal type of boat you read about that the people come on. This was a cruiser. This was a cruise ship. And my mother remembers it well because she didn't have a well day on the ship. She was deathly seasick. And so my father took care of me, this 8-month-old infant, on the ship, and with the help of a lot of the people who came, who were vacationing. These were not people escaping from Nazism. This was the way this trip went. My father came with $10 in his pocket, a wife, and an infant, knowing that he would never see his family again, and that played on him. He had a lot of post-trauma. I don't know how he did that, now that I look back on it. I'd heard this story over and over again, and it was, okay, that. But now, when I have children of my own, and I don't know how that even was possible to do. Coming to a country that you never set sail, you don't know the language, don't know anything about the country, and he worked day and night, even though he was employed. They didn't pay him very much because they paid for a lot of the trip, but then he worked his way up and he did okay. So the man was not lazy, but he carried a lot of baggage, and they went back. My parents have been back 3 times. One trip my mother called me back, called me on the phone. This must have been probably in the late 70s or early 80s. They went back in their first trip. And they went back to see their home, and they went back to see, and of course, it was still there. Some of the people were still there. These were not the Jewish people, however. But the people were very nice. And of course, she went then to the home of her grandmother that she was so very close to. And when she knocked on the door, there was no answer. And so she knocked a little harder, and the door opened. And everything was in that apartment the way there wasn't anybody there.
Wow. She
went in, and it shocked her so much that she called me up, and when she walked out of there, the door closed, shut. And it was eerie to hear that story. It's eerie to tell that story, but this whole thing is so unbelievable. And I'm still, even now, I've dealt with it in a certain way, and I've had a lot of help to deal with this. I'm still searching for answers. I'm presently reading a book entitled The Seduction of Hitler. And what was it about this man that caused so many people to be as hateful as he is, people that normally would not have done that? And what was it about this man, or what was it about the people that would turn against their neighbors, turn against their families? And then when I read of some of the things that he did that I didn't even know before, it's just, and yet I hear my father's voice saying, be careful of the leader you follow. This is why I have an aversion, you'll probably appreciate this, for these rock concerts where these kids get up and one will start screaming, and then they all do that because they think they have to. I never stand up at a standing ovation. I'm the one person sitting down. I may think it's the best performance in the world, but I'm not going to do it just because you are. And I never could understand why I'm that way, but now I understand why I'm that way. You have to really and peer pressure did not exist in my life because I had a lot of friends, but I was my own person. I still am, and so are my children. That's how they were raised. You don't do things just because somebody tells you. It has to be the right thing to do. Now, in their minds, it probably was. Interestingly enough, Hitler was much more persuasive on the men than he was on the women. Most of the women were kept ignorant to a point, and once they realized what was going on, they began to, and one of the reasons that was the case, Hitler knew the strength of a group of women, and he therefore chose to keep them in their place. And once they got wind of what was going on with their husbands, and they banded together and weakened him a little bit. So it's kind of an interesting situation.
How did your experience with the Holocaust and your family's experience shape your American childhood?
Well, you don't really want to hear that one, do you?
How did it make, in many ways, I know it made your life very much different than any other just American child. Like, how was it different living?
It was very different living, still different living. Basically, I was an American child when I walked out the front door. When I walked into the door, I was European. Not all of that was bad, by the way. I was given a tremendous amount, because my parents were raised with this value of music and drama and art. I was exposed to, I went to the opera at the age of 4 and was spellbound. I mean, I loved it and had all of these kinds of experiences. They were raising me like the European person. And so when my friends went to a basketball game or something, I didn't know why that was fun. My mother is the biggest Pacer fan you'll ever see. She can tell you anything. She would, and my mom will be 90 in May. Last year, my daughter and son-in-law took her to a Pacer game. They had seats in one of the suites. Well, she's very charming. She's typical European. And so they wined her and dined her. Well, I thought she died, went to heaven right there. It had these seats right there, could see it, and the people there could not get over her because she's the ultimate basketball. And what's ironic about that is, as I was growing up, if I would have been that way, they would have thought there was something wrong with me. So I didn't really, I didn't have fun the same way you guys had fun. And I didn't know that that was so different because I guess I got older much younger. And that's the big difference. I knew a lot about the world. I knew a lot about the dark side of life at the age of 3. I was translating from English to German and German to English. At the age of 2, I was bilingual. It was survivor skill. I don't know where that came from, but I did that because I had to, because my parents really weren't fluent in English at the time. Later it was better, but when they first came here, a year and a half, I really wasn't a baby, per se. And I see a little of that in my oldest son and his 2.5-year-old. He's kind of scary. And I don't know whether that's a genetic thing or what it is, but we were always on the alert. There was never total relaxation in my life. I still can't do that.
What happened to you on Holocaust Remembrance Day? How were you dealing with it?
Really, up until about 5 years ago, nothing. I was sort of sucked into Holocaust Remembrance Day to be a judge for the Holocaust stories that kids wrote in schools, and one of the people that was chairing that asked me to read some of the stories, look at some of the artwork. To be honest, at this point in my life, I'm trying to distance myself a little bit from not the fact that it happened, but the feelings that it brings about, the pain. It seems like it's always there, no matter how jovial and because one of the main things is whenever there was a family function, there was no family. And that really didn't even hit me until, well, 12 years ago. We sat around the dining room, and it was a Jewish holiday, and there was my mother. At one time as a child, I was aware that some of my Jewish friends were talking about their families were coming for dinner. And then I sat down at my table. There were only 3 of us. But it still didn't register until I saw my 3 children with my parents and my husband and I. And somehow, at that time, something kind of snapped. It was 3 years of downhill. And I realized that I had no brothers and sisters. I had no extended family. That isn't totally true. My father's brothers did escape in New York. They became so fanatically religious in order to protect themselves. They never left New York. They never left their neighborhood. They all died within a 3-year period, and they all lived to be 89, 90. My dad passed away 3 years ago at 90. They were like in total shell shock, like zombies. I mean, that's the only way I have cousins. If you want to know how that life affected you, I would say it affected them a lot. And they don't even know I exist, really. So that's almost worse, to know that they're our cousins, but we don't really know who we are. We live entirely different worlds. And yet I understand it perhaps more so than they do, because we were all raised with traumatized parents.
Thank you so much for all of this. Is there anything else you would like to share?
Well, I'd like to share the story about my piano, because it's the focal point of, this is like a little trophy, and I will tell you why. I played the piano because I was just playing the piano, but and I used to have a little upright that sat right across that wall, and it was just fine. When I was growing up, my mother would always lament about what the Nazis took out of her home, and they would come in and confiscate all your stuff. And most of the stuff I really didn't care about one way or the other, but she would always lament about her baby grand piano that her grandmother had given her. And the Nazis came while she was there and took it. And you have no recourse. They stored all of those things in a warehouse and distributed amongst the Germans. And these women bought the things and the men bought the things. That's a whole other book. But I was never without a piano. We had an acquaintance that used to live in Indianapolis, and when I was 15, she moved away, and that was it. I didn't even know that she was living. Or about 2 years ago, I get a phone call. I mean, this is literally this weird thing. And who is it? It's this person. Well, I was like, I mean, total no contact in all these years. And this person, who is now 71 years old, started to talk how she wants to reconnect with some of the people she knew. And I thought, this is really weird, but keep talking. She doesn't even live in Indianapolis. She lives in Maryland. And on and on and on. And then she said, did you ever get any money from Germany that you're due? And I said, why would I be due some money, me personally? She said, well, you were denied a European education. And I said, well, really? I was 8 months old. I didn't feel I was denied anything. She said, no. She said, my sister-in-law is a United States Senator. And she said, I'm going to send you papers. Fill them out. I think you'll be surprised. I thought, this person is a space cadet. And she really is. But anyway, what the heck. She sent the papers. Within a week, I had them. And I had always been saving for someday when my kids are out of school and blah, blah, blah. And then I had 3 get married within 1 year, 13 months. I had 3 weddings. And I was saving and spending and saving and spending. But it was coming together, and that was like number 7 on the list. It wasn't a priority, but I had some money set aside. And when I priced the things, I thought, it's going to be a long haul here. But I thought, okay, I'll send this in. Well, in no time at all, I would say within 3 months, because I'd even forgotten I'd mailed the papers in. I get a check from Germany with the exact remaining amount that I would need to buy that piano. The next day, I went, well, I've been looking around at them, but when I saw what they cost, I figured, I went to Meridian Music, came across the nicest, dearest little salesperson you ever cared to meet, and I love to play, and he said, help yourself, play. Now we had Steinways, we had $40,000 pianos, and I'm thinking this is really nice, but no, thank you. And then I thought, where am I even going to put it? This room isn't that big. He said, well, let me give you a template. You take it home. We had the template. Okay, I go back, and I purchased this piano. I had a choice of a shiny piano or a matte finish. And I debated. I liked them both, but I decided I'll go for the shiny piano. And I thought, well, will you give me anything for the piano that I have? Because I took good care of it, and my parents got that for me. I always had a piano, but they bought me this newer one when I graduated from college, and then I brought it here when I got married. And he came, he said, I'll have to look at it. I said, well, when do you want to come out to see it? He said, I'll come right now. So we drove him here, and he looked at the piano, and he said, this is highly marketable. And he gave me $300 more than what the piano cost to begin with, which was a nice deal. And so we purchased the piano. I then had it delivered, and I brought my mother over, and I said, I want you to, and she knew I bought it, to look at it, and she looked at it, she says, that looks exactly like the one. So I told my children that if something happens to me, this is never to be sold. They all have pianos, well, no, they don't all have pianos, 2 out of 3, but it's not to be sold. I don't care, give it to one of the grandchildren, because I said, it isn't the exact one, but it, in a way, it is. So I call that my little trophy, and and now I'm getting all kinds of little mail from Europe. It's interesting. They have guilty consciences over there. These are not the people that really did anything, but they want to do restitution, and so they send you dribbles and drips and all. But this was the only check I got. Well, then I received something else, and I had to fill out what did I lose in Vienna. Well, I didn't lose anything, but I thought, what the heck, you know? And then came the question, why did I leave? And I wrote 3 pages. And when I wrote it in English, and I vented, and I said, first thing was, why are you asking the question? And why do you think we're having this correspondence? I cannot believe the mentality of some of these people, but I unloaded. So I haven't heard from them yet, and I may never hear from them. But it was very therapeutic to know that I'm sending it back to them. And they know. And it's an embarrassment to the younger generation. But morally, I don't hear any apologies, other than it was an embarrassment to them as a government. I don't hear that this was wrong and it should have never happened. I don't hear that from any of them. I didn't hear it from those 2 men that spoke. Well, the one man, the other one, of course. But I don't think they have a moral conscience about it. I never have sensed that. They regret it. They're sorry it ever happened. All of those things. But I don't hear the compassion. And I think that's what angers me the most. Oh, we didn't know what was going on. And had we known, and blah, blah. Yeah, you missed it. So that's kind of where that is.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Well, that was simple.
That was.
Yeah. So don't we ask first whether we...
Do you want more light or something, like on the dining room table?
This is Dora Michelle, and this is Ida Michelle, and her name is really Dora. Did she explain that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, but,
That's the passenger
oops.
list, okay, of the ship they rode to get to America. And this is the passenger pass.
Passport.
Passport, sorry.
Oh my goodness.
It's,
And the J stands for Jewish.
Jewish.
Of which they identified all the Jews.
this is her mother.
Went out, but we really